Thank you for your interest in the Waco Metropolitan Organization's Draft Active Transportation Plan. This presentation will provide a brief overview of the draft plan and the proposed recommendations. So this presentation will give you an idea of the type of information you can find in the plan. We'll start by talking a little bit about the MPO and the purpose of the Active Transportation Plan. We'll cover the types of outreach conducted to inform the plan. We'll provide information on the extent and condition of the existing bike and pedestrian network, provide an analysis of crash data, and then go into the plan's recommendations. We'll also provide information on the review schedule and the next steps after the public comment period closes. MPOs are required for urban areas with a population of 50,000 or more, such as the Waco metropolitan area, which includes all of McLennan County. The Waco MPO is governed by a 20-member policy board and informed by a 36-member technical committee. The role of the MPO is to provide local input into long-term regional transportation decisions. The MPO helps to guide how the future transportation network in McLennan County should look and function for all users, and how federal highway and transit funds will be used within the Waco region. The MPO also assists local governments and TxDOT in identifying regional transportation priorities. So the purpose of this active transportation plan is to focus on the mobility needs of bicyclists and pedestrians. We use the term active transportation because it relates to human-powered, multimodal transportation solutions that connect people of all ages and abilities to where they need to go using active modes. The goals and desired outcomes of the plan are to update the inventory of the existing roadway and sidewalk network in McLennan County, update the MPO's Bicycle Suitability Index, and review existing and ongoing plans that relate to bicycle and pedestrian mobility. We also want to improve safety and identify community needs and priorities. We want to improve bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, increase walking and biking activity in Waco, and encourage healthy and equitable communities. Developed a prioritized list of strategies, projects, policies, and programs, and identify projects to include in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And also, we want to be able to share these recommendations with the MPO member cities for potential implementation. So next we'll talk about public outreach conducted for this plan. So before we started writing the draft active transportation plan, we conducted public outreach to better understand community needs and priorities. This included a public kickoff meeting, presentations to advocacy groups, coalitions, and neighborhood associations, and stakeholder interviews with schools and local governments. Traditional comment forms are made available, and we also had an online public opinion survey and online mapping exercise. We also continuously engaged our bicycle and pedestrian work group throughout the planning process. The online survey was a public opinion survey to learn about the bicycle and pedestrian experience in Waco and McLennan County. It was an opportunity to ask people to tell us about their top concerns and priorities for future investments in active transportation modes. Over 200 people responded to the survey, and about 76 preferred routes were mapped. The survey results can be found in Appendix A of the plan. The results of the survey indicate that while not many people ride bikes or walk or roll as their means of transportation, they are interested in driving less and biking and walking or rolling more. However, the lack of basic bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and connectivity makes it hard to make this choice. Therefore, a new bicycle infrastructure should, at least at first, focus on the novice rider, and pedestrian improvements should, at least at first, focus on connecting residential areas to potential destinations, such as parks, basic services, and amenities. And we use the term rolling to capture the mobility needs of a pedestrian that uses a wheelchair, stroller, walker, or another wheeled device to help them get around. So next we'll talk about the existing condition of the pedestrian and bicycle network. Here in the Waco region, we have sidewalk in various states of repair. So some sidewalks are in poor condition, like this example here on the left from East Waco. Some sidewalks are fair or okay. So these sidewalks may be relatively free of cracks or obstructions, but might be too narrow or too close to traffic, like this example from Franklin Avenue. We also have good quality sidewalks that are wide, clear, separated from traffic, and in good condition. We also have some areas with connected sidewalks, like this neighborhood here. We also have sidewalks to nowhere, where there may be recently installed sidewalk that meets current requirements, but it ends abruptly at the property line. We also have some cases like this last example, where The sidewalk is clear, and they have proper ADA treatments at intersections and driveways. But many sidewalk examples within our Waco region are kind of inaccessible, especially to someone using a wheelchair or stroller, such as this photo here that has an obstruction in the middle of the sidewalk, this utility pole. Sometimes it's something like a utility pole, oftentimes it's landscaping. MPO staff updated the sidewalk inventory for McLennan County using Google Street View and satellite imagery. The sidewalk inventory notes where sidewalks exist and in what condition. As shown on this map, the majority of existing sidewalks are in fair condition. Most of the green or good sidewalk is in the downtown Waco and Baylor area and in some of the newer and higher end subdivisions. A lot of the fair or poor sidewalk is located in the urban core. However, as you get out of the greater downtown Waco area, there are not many areas with sidewalk at all. You can see a lot of white space or no sidewalk in primarily residential areas like Woodway or Hewitt and around Lake Waco. So this active transportation plan also prepared a sidewalk inventory for some of the rural cities, and this information is available in the draft plan. MPO staff also developed a walking propensity index, which considers the proximity and density of attractors. So, in other words, is your desired destination located within walking distance? And if so, is there an easy, mostly direct way to walk there? Inputs for this analysis include things like residential density, commercial density, land use mix, and street connectivity. So this map shows the walking propensity by transportation analysis zone. The most walkable areas are primarily near downtown and Baylor, which is like those red and pink colors. The less walkable areas are the blues, greens, and white colors, and again, are in primarily single-family residential areas near the lake, Woodway, as well as some areas in Belmead and Lacey Lakeview. Moving on to bikes, here's an overview of the types of bikeways that we have or will soon have in the Waco region, starting from the most separation from motor vehicles to the least separation. First is a shared use path, which is off-street. An example is the Brazos Riverwalk or the Cotton Belt Trail. Next is a protected bike lane or a cycle track, which is on the roadway but is physically separated from the travel lanes by a physical barrier, whether that's a curb or plastic delineators or a parking lane. We will have a protected bike lane along Washington Avenue in the near future. Next is a buffered bike lane, which is like a regular bike lane except that it has a painted buffer area, usually 2 to 3 feet, that offers some additional separation from cars. This is an example from Panther Way. We also have traditional bike lanes like the one in downtown, for example on 5th Street. And we also have signed bike routes. So on these signed bike routes, bikes share the travel lane with cars. In the future, we'll also have bike routes with stamped pavement markings called sharrows, which is this photo here in the corner. Sharrows help to alert drivers to the potential presence of bicycles and help bicyclists navigate the bike route. Currently, there are a little over 13 miles of off-street separated bikeways in the Waco region, such as shared use paths, and about 9 miles of bike lanes, including those on Baylor campus, and about 3.5 miles of signed bike routes. However, the city of Waco has planned for at least 15 miles of additional bikeways to be installed as part of roadway improvement projects or grant projects in the near future. As you can see on this map, with the exception of the downtown Waco area, there aren't many bikeways on the ground, and the ones that are there don't really provide meaningful connections to where people might want to go, whether that's school, a park, a restaurant, or work. We really need additional miles of bikeways which connect to each other if we want biking to be a viable transportation option. MPO staff also updated our bicycle suitability index for this plan. The Bicycle Suitability Index looks at the major roadways in McLennan County, so collector, classification, or higher, and provides a suitability rating, which is the expected comfort level for a novice cyclist. The blues and greens are expected to be easy to moderate for a bicyclist to ride on. Yellows and reds would be difficult or not recommended for a novice cyclist. The purples are extremely not recommended, for example, a section of Franklin Avenue. And then there are streets where bicyclists are just not permitted at all, and those are shown here in the red dashed color. Neighborhood streets or local streets are assumed to be generally suitable for a novice cyclist since they typically have lower speed limits and lower traffic volumes. This suitability index is useful on its own if someone wants to map out a route from point A to point B on which they'd feel comfortable riding. However, it also helps us when considering projects for the active transportation plan. For example, a street that's blue or green may be suitable for a shared lane. However, on a yellow or red street, bikes will probably require some degree of separation from vehicle traffic. Next, we'll talk about safety. The MPO looked at all bicycle and pedestrian involved crashes that occurred in McLennan County between 2010 and 2017. This information is from the TxDOT Crash Records Information System. In this 8-year time frame, there were a total of 553 bicycle or pedestrian involved crashes. Of these, 72% resulted in a serious injury, 18% resulted in a non-serious injury, and 10% resulted in a fatality. Compare this to all crashes, which is all crashes including those between vehicles. The crash severity rate is basically reversed, with the non-serious injury rate comprising 84% of the total and serious injury about 15%. Fatalities are about 1% of all crashes. This is a reminder that bicyclists and pedestrians are vulnerable road users with limited protection from the forces involved in a collision with a motor vehicle. Here's a crash trend for the same time period, 2010 to 2017. As you see here, overall crashes involving bicyclists and pedestrians have trended upward. This is not unique to our region. This same trend is occurring at the state level and nationwide as well. You'll also notice a sharp uptick in pedestrian-involved crashes for 2016 and 2017. We don't have data on exactly why this is happening, but it's likely a combination of factors. Here's a map of the bicycle-involved crashes within our urbanized area. There were 172 crashes in this time frame. There's a concentration of serious injuries, which is the orange square, or fatalities, the red triangle, in the greater downtown and Waco and Baylor area, which corresponds to where most of the bicycle activity occurs. There are a total of 381 pedestrian crashes in McLennan County between 2010 and 2017, and there are a cluster of fatalities in the Belmead area. In Belmead, over 85% of all bicycle and pedestrian crashes, so both modes, resulted in a serious injury or fatality. The regional average is 74%. When reviewing the crash circumstances in more detail, the following factors appear to be an issue within the Belmead area. There seems to be a relatively high demand for pedestrian accommodations when factoring in income, land use activity, and trip attractions, such as several large public schools and big box retail. The existing pedestrian infrastructure on the ground is sparse, and much of what does exist is in poor condition. Most of the significant trip attractors are physically separated from residential areas by roadways that create a barrier to pedestrians. So some examples are I-35 and Walmart, and Loop 340 and La Vega High School. And also, nearly all of the arterial roadways in Belmead have a posted speed limit in excess of 45 miles per hour. So that was a general overview of the type of information and analysis that you can find in the Active Transportation Plan. The draft plan that's available online for review has more detailed discussion in all of these sections. So now it's time to move on to the ATP recommendations. When thinking about the plan's recommendations, we first looked at the analysis that we just discussed. So what's the extent and condition of the existing bicycle and pedestrian network? What is the crash data telling us? What projects have already been identified and prioritized in long-range plans or studies, such as the city's comprehensive plans, the 17-18-19 corridor study, or our transit needs study? And what have we learned from our public outreach process about community needs and priorities? And how can we engage our subject matter experts via our bicycle and pedestrian work group to help us formulate project recommendations? In addition to gathering these data sets and trying to understand what's happening specifically here in our region, we also took a look at the state of the practice and did a lot of research on best practices from not just the transportation field, but also the recreation and public health fields. We also took a look at other adopted active transportation plans that we thought did a really good job of communicating this sort of information to the public. We kept a few basic frameworks in mind when formulating recommendations that tie back to the goals and desired outcomes for the active transportation plan. First, for bikes, we want our bike network to accommodate a target user that's defined in the literature in a few different ways. All ages and abilities, interested but concerned, or novice cyclists. This target user desires greater separation from motor vehicle traffic and or prefers using a low-stress roadway, which is a roadway with less traffic and slower speeds. For this type of bicyclist, a lack of comfortable bike facilities will outright prevent them from biking. So by designing with these folks in mind, We can develop a safe, comfortable, and equitable bike network that will benefit existing cyclists who are already out there, including those fearless road warriors or commuters. For pedestrians, we want to focus our attention on creating accessible walking and rolling routes and pay special attention to intersections and safe crossings, not just crossing across the width of a street, but also looking at how far apart safe crossings are located along a roadway and how this affects the ability for a pedestrian to safely walk or roll. We also wanted to highlight the importance of accessible pedestrian routes to and from transit, especially locations where we have documented high numbers of boardings, for example, at McLennan Community College and Central Texas Marketplace. Another important framework for the ATP recommendations is the concept of connectivity and convenience. In order to truly serve as a transportation alternative, walking, rolling, and biking must feel sufficiently safe and convenient. And for longer trips, you need to be able to connect to public transit. Some streets act as a barrier to a safe and convenient network. These streets have high traffic volumes, high vehicle speeds, wide right-of-ways, and limited signalized intersections for safe crossings. In this example, you can see on the left here in this figure, if a person wants to walk or bike to school, they need to take a circuitous route, and they're forced onto higher volume, higher traffic streets. In the second example, they can take a more direct route that is likely low stress with less traffic volume and lower speeds. While there's not much we can do about the existing roadway network design, we can use this ideology to help us choose the right corridors for our active transportation improvements and help us to right-size the design. So now we'll move on to a discussion of the recommendations of the plan. The recommendations are organized into a 6E framework. The idea is that building a bicycle and pedestrian-friendly community will take more than just engineering and infrastructure projects. Infrastructure projects need to be complemented by policies, programs, regulations, and long-range planning and evaluation. We'll start with education, outreach, and encouragement, and touch on engineering last. So our community is already doing a lot on its own in regards to outreach and encouragement. For example, Waco Walks hosts community walks, and the Waco Bicycle Club hosts community bike rides. However, the MPO and our local cities can help by partnering with or coordinating with these organizations. Apps such as the Waco Transit app that lets you track where the bus or shuttle is, and maps such as the Waco Convention Center and Visitor Bureau's cycling map also provide key information to make it easier to make the choice to walk, bike, or take transit. This set of recommendations will go a long way to building a more walk-friendly and bike-friendly community. The example photo that we're showing here is from Harlingen, and they have a successful monthly social bike ride. They have regular participation from local businesses, city leadership, their MPO, and they also have police escorts on bikes for their rides. The next set of E's is enforcement, evaluation, and planning. This is the section where we talk about ordinances and regulations that need to be reviewed and strengthened. On this slide, you'll see examples of the types of recommendations you'll find in the plan. For example, reviewing and strengthening sidewalk ordinances to determine if existing regulations promote pedestrian-friendly design, and reviewing who is responsible for maintaining a public sidewalk. You could also consider a cost-sharing program between the property owner and the city. We also recommend adopting a routine accommodation or complete streets policy to establish a process to accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians in all transportation projects. We recommend adding bike parking requirements instead of just vehicle parking, or allowing partial substitution of multimodal facilities for vehicle parking. We also recommend reviewing and strengthening safety regulations, such as the Vulnerable Road Users Ordinance, helmet requirements, minimum street lighting, and rules against harassment of bicyclists. And also, it's very important to have continuous engagement with our bicycle and pedestrian work group, who will help keep us accountable and continually monitor and evaluate our progress. We also have an E for equity. Active transportation is generally an equitable use of transportation dollars when it is designed for people of all ages and abilities. Everyone benefits from better pedestrian and bicycling conditions, especially those who do not have a car or can't drive. At the MPO, it's important for us to be sure that we balance the distribution of benefits and burdens of the federally funded transportation program. So now we get into the E for engineering, or our recommended infrastructure projects. We are calling this the universe of need because it's a whole lot of projects, more than 200, that will cost a whole lot of money. Realistically, it would take a very long time to implement, well beyond our 2045 planning horizon for this document. These infrastructure projects are specific in that they describe the proposed project type, for example, bike lane versus bike route, sidewalk on one side versus two sides, and the roadway corridor for the proposed improvement. We also consider existing constraints such as traffic volume, the right-of-way width, adjacent land uses, things like that. However, this is a planning level document, and additional review and study would be required to take this from plan to a project. So here's a partial cost estimate of the universe of need. It's not a full accounting of the universe of need, which is $370 million, but it provides the cost for some items of interest. For example, the first set of items are projects that primarily benefit pedestrians and bicyclists, such as new sidewalks, new shared use paths, bicycle pedestrian bridges or overpasses, and bike route signage. However, we also wanted to highlight a second set of projects which would benefit everyone that uses the roadway. So for example, new lane striping and pavement markings, new pavement in general, newer upgraded traffic signals, and new and improved street lighting. So here's what the universe of need looks like. There are 17 different categories of projects. Also shown on this map are the barrier streets that we talked a little bit about, shown in the red and black color. These are the roads that make it difficult to truly provide a connected and convenient network. Here's the same universe of need, but looking at the entire county. Beyond city limits, you'll mostly see regional bike routes in pink. The sidewalk and other bikeway projects are primarily concentrated within the urbanized areas in other cities such as McGregor, Lorena, and Robinson. I will note that it was challenging to identify reasonable bike routes near Riesel and Mart. There are too many high-speed roadways and not very many alternatives in this area, and it's going to require some future study before we recommend any bike routes here. So because the universe of need is so extensive, we needed to prioritize and refine our recommendations. We came up with a set of regional and local priority corridors. These priority corridors represent about 1/3 of the universe of need. The first set, the regional corridors, are projects that usually cross municipal boundaries with the intent of creating continuous bike and pedestrian corridors within the urbanized area. The second set, the local priorities, build on the regional corridors and extend the connectivity to adjacent neighborhoods. Usually, these projects do not cross municipal boundaries. Here's a map of the priority corridor projects. The shades of pink represent municipal boundaries. Example of regional corridors, so the green color, include China Spring to downtown Waco using the existing Lake Waco Dam Trail as a connector, Business 77 to LaSalle to Old Robinson Road, and Bagby Avenue to Texas Central Parkway to Sanger Avenue. Some of the local corridors in yellow include 17, 18, 19 streets in Waco, a network in East Waco, and a network in Belmead. So that's the plan in a nutshell. You'll find a lot more detailed discussion in the plan that's available online for review and download. Right now we're in the middle of the comment period, and the last day to submit comments on this draft is July 5th. You can send us comments via email, you can call us, you can mark up a map and send it to us by mail or email, whichever method you prefer is fine with us. After the comment period closes, we will review all of the comments we received and make any necessary changes to the plan. We'll then present the final plan to our technical committee on July 11th and ask them to make a recommendation to the policy board. The policy board will meet on July 18 and hold a public hearing on the plan and hopefully vote to adopt the plan at that meeting. So thank you for listening, and always feel free to contact us with any thoughts, comments, or suggestions.